It's very rare that I actually get emotional before I've even started recording a video, but today's topic is something that's very, very important to me. It's something that if you are suffering from a gambling addiction or you have had problems with gambling in the past will be probably very close to home to you too. And I also think that it's probably one of the most important videos I've ever made. So it probably will be longer than your average video. There's a lot I want to talk about, a lot I want to cover. But bearing in mind that what I'm talking about is the number one reason why I got into recovery. And I think also it's the number one most long-lasting effect, long-lasting symptom of a gambling addiction that we have to live with. I think it's important to discuss it in detail and in a very candid, open and honest way, as it's something that we have to continually battle with even once we have been clear from gambling from any period of time. I will say I hope you're keeping safe and I hope you're keeping sane. There will always be a Patreon link in the description below, and I'll talk more about that sort of thing at the end of the video because I don't want to sort of dilute this message with my normal self-promotion. But you won't have to forego that too much because that will be at the end of the video, so stay tuned. Now, what I want to talk about today, as probably the thumbnail or the title has alluded to, is guilt. There are many, many negative effects, many negative symptoms of a gambling addiction. Financial loss, loss of time, loss of jobs, loss of homes, all that sort of stuff, right? Stuff that we've spoken about many times before. But something I've not done much more than touch upon is the guilt that we feel that is associated with our gambling addiction. And so, like I say, I want to break this down into what causes the guilt, how we can then deal with the guilt as we get into and sustain a recovery, and the long-lasting effects that this guilt would have, as well as the reason that guilt or potential guilt was the number one driving factor in me finally making the decision to address my gambling addiction and get into some form of lasting recovery. So let's look at the types of guilt we may experience as a gambling addict. Now, something I've spoken about many times before is the lies we tell once we're in the midst of this addiction. And that could be something as simple as why we're late home. We got told we got stuck at the office when in reality we were, in the bookies playing the fobties, as to why certain money has gone into certain places, i.e., well, I thought you had that 300 quid for the holiday payment yesterday. And you go, well, actually, what happened was something with the car, or the fact that you don't have any money and you blame it on, oh, well, no, there was an admin error at work and my wages didn't go through properly. There's a whole host of lies that we tell other people to disguise the effects or other symptoms of our gambling addictions. We also tell a significant number of lies to ourselves. However, somehow we can often sort of put that on parity within ourselves, and we don't suffer the ongoing guilt that lying to others, particularly those closest to us, does carry. We feel guilt about the other things that we could/should have spent our gambling losses upon. Losing money, and money as an entity in and of itself, is sort of fundamentally hollow. If someone said, I lost £1,000 in the fobties, £1,000, whilst we know inherently roughly how much that is, roughly how much it's worth, and roughly how much we'd have to work to achieve it, in and of itself is just a number. However, if your partner or your wife or whatever wants to go on holiday, but you're talking about it as a household and can we really afford it, and actually this needs doing, and the boiler needs repairing, and the car needs a service, and all of this sort of thing, and you've just lost £1,000, which could have been a nice package holiday for the two of you, then you'll carry that guilt with you because you could have done something nice, something that's good for not just the other person, but for you and for your relationship. You could have done something that would have been a far more practical, pleasurable and beneficial use of the money than waste it and then lie about the fact you never had it in the first place. One of the forms of guilt I felt the most when I was gambling was my partner's financial problems. Now, the vast majority of people at some point in their life are going to experience financial problems, financial shortfalls, unexpected costs, unexpected bills, car repairs, that sort of thing. And yeah, it happens to us all. However, had I not been gambling, when my wife had come to me, upset, distressed because the car had broken down and she didn't have the money to have a gearbox rebuild, which is very much a true story, When she came to me and was really distressed, really upset, had I not been gambling, had I not lost such a substantial amount, whether it be a one-off or a day-to-day drip feed of losses, I would have been in the position to turn around and go, well, don't worry about it. I've got the money. I'll pay for it. And then if she decided she wanted to pay me back or whatever, then great. But, I would have been in a position to step up and help her in her time of need. But I couldn't. And I had to then console her and witness her distress, all the time knowing this is a situation I could have mitigated had I not been partaking in this activity, which I had already accepted was causing me problems, and I'd already accepted that I needed to change. The final type of guilt, although I'm sure there are many others which I haven't covered off, and if you've got anything else that you think needs to be addressed, then please do pop it in the comments section, is the source of the money you've lost. As I always say, financial losses and money are not the number one important loss when it comes to gambling. They are an inherent and immediate symptom of a gambling addiction. However, the loss of time, relationships, jobs and opportunities, and indeed life, are far more important than the loss of money. However, we will quite often feel guilt about the money we've lost because of the source of it. Maybe we have borrowed it and we're, from someone who may be a little bit short of money themselves, and we're taking longer than expected to pay it back because of our gambling addiction. We feel guilty because we are compromising that other person's, a close friend or family member's financial position because of our own addiction. Maybe we've blagged the money from somewhere. We've made up another story because as gambling addicts we are fantastic at making up stories as to why we're short of money or why we need money. Maybe we've blagged someone and we feel guilty because we have misled and we have lied to someone close to us just in order to either get the funds in order to perpetuate our addiction or to mend a hole in our own personal finances by borrowing from their personal finances, a hole that was caused by gambling addiction in the first place. Or maybe we've done something inherently immoral or, dare I say, illegal in order to obtain the funds that we are using to either gamble or to repair gambling damage. Now, this could be, stealing from work, liberating money from other places in ways that are immoral or illegal. Okay, and so we carry that inherent guilt, partially because we've caused harm or damage to another, but also because so often these things that we do, the lies we tell, the immoral and, dare I say, illegal things that we do as gambling addicts, are often counterintuitive to our own inbuilt moral values. We do things that we know are wrong. We do things that we wouldn't, if it was not for this addiction, we would never contemplate doing, that we know are not inherent to our character. So not only are we harming others, we are also harming our own sense of self-worth and challenging our own moral guidelines by manipulating situations in order to perpetuate an addiction. I'm going to take what sounds like a vaguely light-hearted aside for a moment. And if you bear with me, you'll understand why I'm talking about this. If you are married, or if you are living with a partner, then it might be that on occasion that partner goes away for the night. My wife does it occasionally. She'll meet up with friends and they'll go on like a spa day or something and they'll stay in a hotel and have dinner and all the rest of it, right? Okay, details are relevant. But there will be that time where your partner says, I've made plans with old Jane and we're going up to a spa and I won't be back till Sunday morning. And if you're anything like me, and there's a good chance if you're watching this video you may be at least a little bit like me, sorry about that, that your day goes like this. You do all the things that you know that had you come home to your wife or your partner or your husband or whatever, that they would maybe judge you for in a negative light. If I was to go out to the pub on a Saturday afternoon to watch the football and I had a dozen pints of beer and got a bit drunk, came home, ordered a pizza, sat in my pants on the sofa watching Police Interceptors, eating a pizza in my pants, then quite rightly and quite understandably, my choice of activities and behaviour on that day would be inherently judged by my partner. So what do I do when I suddenly find out she's away for the night? Well, I go to the pub, drink 12 pints of lager, come home, sit, watch Police Interceptors in my pants while eating a Domino's pizza. And that's because I know that this is a rare occasion where I can partake in these, dare I say, harmful but ultimately inconsequential activities without the fear of judgment or more importantly, there may be the fear of an argument coming off the back of this about how I need to sort my life out and maybe not partake in these things. Okay. So why do I talk about this, apart from giving you the horrible image of me eating Dominoes in my pants? Well, what happens with this guilt is sometimes we like to think about changing our own levels of accountability in order to rid ourselves of the guilt. I.e., in this situation, if I go out and I lose my month's wages gambling, if I know I'm going to come home to my wife and I'm going to have to be honest and confess to what I've done in order to basically repair the situation, I know that there's going to be an argument that ensues. I know that there's going to be judgment, I know there's going to be friction, and I know that's going to cause an awful lot of problems. And selfishly, on top of a substantial gambling loss and the negative emotions that I'm already feeling, I don't want to be going home to be confronted with this further judgment, which is quite rightful, but also not exactly what you need when you're already in that very negative mind frame. So part of your brain manipulates the situation and goes, well, actually, it'd be so much better off if I was single, if I didn't have this negative judgment to come home to. And all you're doing there with that hypothetical scenario is allowing the addiction, you're facilitating the addictive behaviour by withdrawing not only judgment, but the very thing that may actually turn out to be the largest supplier of support in your life, i.e. the people closest to you. So in the same way that, it's great to come home to an empty house once in a while because I can go out and eat and drink and be merry and fall asleep in my pants on the sofa watching Police Interceptors. Okay, whilst once in a while that's a bit of a hedonistic, blowout of bad behaviours, but ultimately inconsequential behaviours. The idea that you'd rather get rid of your biggest support network, the person who is likely to stick with you through thick and thin, just so that this horrible, insidious and highly costly addiction can further manifest itself without judgment, is the same as the desire in many occasions to, rather than accept our guilt, be humble, be apologetic, explain the situation and talk about our addiction, we would rather cause friction with those people closest to us, cause arguments, and in our own mind make that person out to be the bad party in the situation, again, in order to avoid addressing the reality of the situation. I hope that makes sense, and like I say, hasn't given you nightmares about me eating pizza in my pants. So let's look at the reality of gambling guilt. And if we've been gambling for any period of time, if we have accepted and acknowledged that we have an addiction and we want to do something about it, it's almost invariable that we will carry some type of gambling and guilt, and it will mostly fall under the categories I've spoken about above. So what do? Well, the first thing to do is acknowledge that we can't change the past. And this sounds incredibly cliched and self-helpy, but it's absolutely true. If you've done something in the past, be that immoral, illegal, you've upset people, you've hurt people, you've caused damage, you've not been there for people when you should be, either that be physically or, like I say in my example, when you were able or should have been able to assist someone financially, you will have to live with that. Now, those feelings of guilt and remorse will fade, and I assure you they will fade, but they will never leave you. They will always remain in your subconscious. And this is actually important because, like I've spoken about before, you wake up in the morning after a particularly heavy session of gambling, after a particularly significant loss, and you get that immediate punched in the stomach feeling when you get that dawn of realisation as to what you've done the day before, what's happened and the situation you've left yourself in, what I call a gambling hangover. Okay. I always talk about how it's very important when you have that feeling to act upon it as soon as possible, whilst that pain is still fresh, whilst you're still experiencing the worst symptoms of that gambling hangover. Act on it, use it as a proactive way of putting blocks in place and measures in place and talking to people and doing all that recovery stuff that I talk about so much. Because a short-term gambling hangover off the back of a loss, or off the back of an argument or something else, a missed social occasion, whatever, the gambling hangover off the back of a negative gambling experience will fade in time. And if we haven't acted upon it or taken decisive action while we're in the midst of it, once that's faded into obscurity and forgotten about, the old, oh well, a quick punt won't hurt, the quick £20 in the machine, I'll just go on and deposit 50, that little voice will rear its ugly head again. So the fact that we have this remorse, this ongoing and lasting gambling guilt from whatever source that might be from our past, that will remain at the back of our subconscious for probably the rest of our lives, and certainly from my experience it's not going anywhere quickly, whilst it will fade, it will remain there as a constant reminder as to why we are in recovery and to the past damage that we truly wish we will never repeat. What we can do, and the only way in some senses to mitigate some form of this guilt, is to talk to those people that we've affected. Now, it might be that a lot of the people we have affected in our past, be that sort of romantic relationships, personal relationships, friendship, family, even such things like jobs where we've deceived work and ended up losing our jobs, we may no longer be in contact with, and we may not have the ability to speak to and reconcile. Now, if you do decide that you want to speak to people to talk about your past misdemeanors, then it's very important that you do it not as a means to dump on those people your woes and, your self-loathing. Okay, it's not there to clear your conscience. It's there because that is, as far as is possible, the only means by which to make amends for your past mistakes. So if you lied to someone, if you'd blagged them into lending you money or giving you money, firstly, if you haven't paid it back, then you can tell them, this is why I did it, this is the situation I was in, I'm really sorry, I will pay you that money back as soon as possible. Now, there may be an argument ensue. They may actually turn out to be a very useful part of your support network. But that is, at that point, the most you can offer that person in terms of reconciling your previous behaviours. So talk to people. Explain the situation you're in. Don't turn it into a pity party. Don't expect them to accept, understand, or support you. But you might find in some instances that conversation does multiple goods. It will, maybe satisfy that person as to the reasons you behaved in a certain way. Maybe it will alleviate your conscience and help that gambling guilt to fade as time goes on. And maybe, and don't rely on this, but like I say, maybe that person may become part of your support network in terms of starting and or maintaining a long-lasting recovery from this addiction. So talk to people and be humble and apologise and explain and hope for the best. It won't work out brilliant in every situation, but it's not going to get any better if you don't address it. Once we've done this, once we've spoken to those people we have wronged, once we have tried as much as is possible to make amends in whatever way that is, what we need to do is get rid of the pigeons off the roof of this conservatory. But once we've done that, my apologies, once we've done that, what we need to do is then make a resolution. We need to be resolute in the fact that we can no longer go back to our former behaviours. And that will involve not willpower, although that will certainly play a part in the early stages, but that will involve making a commitment to yourself and to those people that you've spoken to that you will not be doing this in future. And you would then take every step, and you should take every step, every action you can put into place to make sure that doesn't happen. I've spoken a lot in the past about blocks, blocks on banks, GamStop, self-exclusions. I'm talking about handing your finances over to a loved one. All these things which are really, really critical in the early stages of recovery. So go and watch the videos about those because hopefully, that can be of some benefit to you. I won't go over it again, but whatever you do, whatever anyone suggests, then give it a go. If someone suggests going to GA but you don't want to go to GA, well, if it's your partner and you've just come clean to them and you've said how you've lied and cheated and done all of this stuff in the past and you're really sorry you've hurt them, and they're there in front of you saying, well, actually there's a GA meeting here, then you owe it to not just them but to yourself to give that a go. Because whilst I have often spoken about what hasn't worked for me, different things work for different people in different ways in their recoveries. So give everything a go. Show enthusiasm, show willingness to attend meetings, show willingness to get counselling, show willingness, sit down, with your partner, with your family members, whoever it is that you've spoken to, and show them you've signed up for GamStop. Show them that you've done this. Show them that they're the person you trust the most in the world, that you're going to hand your finances over to so they can monitor your expenditure. The proof of the pudding is going to be in the action in this one. Words can be empty platitudes, and coming from a gambler, words probably mean less than they do from the average person because we are so adept at lying and manipulating people and ourselves in order to facilitate and hide our addiction. I'm sure if you go to someone and tell them you've lied to them in the past, then you need to prove to them you're not lying to them now and actually you mean business when it comes to getting into recovery and trying to placate this addiction once and for all. Finally, and this is what I alluded to at the front end of this video, Guilt is one of the primary reasons that I decided I wanted to stop gambling. Not needed, and I've spoken many times about how the need to stop gambling and to get into recovery is not enough. We need to want to stop, and we need to find reasons why we should stop. And this is why ridding yourselves of the burden of judgment, i.e. in my eating Dominoes in my pants after 12 pints example, removing the judgment from your life, whilst can be fun in some respects in very short-term bursts in non-harmful activities, in the long term, it's going to do you no good at all. It's going to facilitate the addiction, and it will lead you to ordering far too much pizza, drinking far too much beer, and not really achieving a lot. Plus, there's only so much Police Interceptors you can watch without losing your mind. So yes, anyway, back to the serious note. I wanted to talk about my reasoning, and that is my parents gave me a fantastic upbringing. My dad worked very, very hard throughout my childhood to ensure that we didn't go without. We weren't spoilt. We didn't live a particularly wealthy lifestyle, but we didn't go without. And my dad was always quite frugal. Not with us, but with himself. He never treated himself to new cars. He never, he was never sort of flash. He never spoilt himself in the same way that he would have, looked after me and my sister. So as a result, he invested his money. He saved his money. He paid off his house. He was, very shrewd. But like I say, also he went without in order to support us, in order to set us up for the future. Now, I've lied to people. I've borrowed money off people under false pretenses, and I've done other stuff in order to facilitate and repair damage done by my gambling addiction. And a lot of that I've now made as much as possible amends for. However, because at some point, and I touch wood that it won't be in the immediate future, I am due to inherit the spoils of my dad's conservatism with money, his frugality, his common sense, and his desire to help set myself and my sister up for a reasonable life in the future. I am due to inherit that. Now, whilst a lot of my gambling and guilt has faded, if upon receiving that money, and knowing the source and knowing the hard work and everything that's been put into it, and the sacrifices that's been put into it, if I use that to further fuel what at the time was my current gambling addiction, to continue to perpetuate and invariably exaggerate this negative behaviour, and I was to basically piss away my dad's legacy and all the work and, like I say, sacrifice he put into ensuring a safety net for our futures, whether I need that or not, it will come my way at some point, then that is guilt that I would never be able to reconcile, that I would have to carry with me for the rest of my life. And it would be a massive, massive disservice to the people in my life who have done the most for me. More for me than, I probably deserve, more for me than I probably could have ever hoped for as an adult human being. And so I needed to ensure that by the time that day, and I hope it's many, many, many years in the future, but by the time that day arrived, I want to be safe in the knowledge that I would be able to live that legacy in a way that would make those people proud. Because that ultimately, and selfishly in this respect, that is guilt that I would never ever be able to recover from. So just to summarise, gambling guilt can come in many, many forms. And removing the judgment and removing the people in our lives to whom we feel guilty is not a solution. It is a very short-term solution that will ultimately exacerbate the guilt itself. The only thing we can do is accept that we've done what we've done. Reconcile it as much as possible. Communicate, apologise, be humble. Don't turn it into a pity party. And accept that some people will not understand, will not forgive, will not forget. Some people will understand, and you can reconcile your differences, and they may even form a positive support network for you in the future. But also decide what guilt you couldn't live with. What things couldn't you ever forgive yourself for, even if others would forgive you for your misdemeanours? And use that as motivation to take the practical steps to prove to those around you, but also for your own future, to preventing yourself from falling further and further into this addiction to a point where the guilt may become too heavy a burden to bear. Thanks very much for watching. I'm wishing everyone the very, very best. Now I'm just going to give myself a bit of self-promotion, so if you're not interested in that, then feel free to click off this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. But I do also actually want to say thank you to everyone who supported me thus far on Patreon. Your support is very, very much appreciated, and hopefully in the future it will allow me to make more videos and reach more people. Yeah, I'm planning to do more over on the Patreon in the future, but if you don't wish to support me that way, if that's not your bag, then that's absolutely fine. I would just ask that if you like the video, if you think they're useful, subscribe, like, do that great YouTube stuff, leave me a comment, because that helps as well, you know. But yeah, like I say, most importantly, take care of yourselves. A very, very serious video, but I think something we really need to talk about. All the best.